Okay, the next project here on the El Camino Resto mod is I'm going to put a trunk in it. Are you kidding me? So there's the bed of the El Camino. And now I've zoomed in on the bed and you can see this black panel here. This is a brand new panel I bought. The old one was pretty beat up, so I wanted to work with this new one. And in the El Camino, the bed had two sections. The back section here, it's stock, and that's going to have to be smoothed out. And then this front piece, and then it was screwed and spot welded down. And you can see it lifts up. And down in there, well, there's a whole bunch of space. The El Camino actually shared a lot of parts with the station wagon. And this was actually the footwell for the back passengers in the station wagon. On the El Camino there's a brace going across here for that front bed piece. And you can see this opening here which goes into the cab. From the factory they had what's called a smuggler's box, and it was just a little bit bigger than a glove box. It was a plastic box that came back into this space so you could store a few things in there. But I'm going to make this piece hinged and have, you know, the hydraulic lifters to hold it up. I'm going to have a latch that is electronically controlled and you know, manual control. And I'm going to put the battery. The battery is going to go back here rather than in the front. It just looks cleaner in the engine compartment, and there's better weight back over the rear tires. And I'll put in a battery cutoff switch and then some jumping slash charging posts for the battery up in the engine compartment up front. That's the project, and we'll see how it goes. I'll walk you through it. So this project, if you look at the factory bed, the joint to the sidewalls and the bed, there's a really big gap. And from the factory, you can see there's some spot welds in here. It's filled with seam sealer. And some guys I've seen have made this whole section. I've pulled this piece of sheet metal out. They make the whole thing hinge up, which is all right. But if you do that, you're going to have a really big gap over here. And I want this to look as though, hey, if the factory did this, what would it look like? And it would be a really nice fit and finish. And also I got this, there's this center brace piece in here, which of course wasn't in the wagon because that was the footwell. It was there for the El Camino because it supported weight. But that's a new piece. I had to put a new pan. It was all rusted. The belly pan was rusted. This brace was rusted. And this is a 68, and the 68 wasn't available. So we had to take a 67 piece and modify it and weld it in there, and it's all welded in before I decided to do this trunk. And that was a lot of work. And, you know, if we put a load, you know, cooler of beer or something on there, I want it to be able to bear the weight and not bow down and sag and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to leave that brace in there because it was a lot of work, and it will give some strength. And there will be plenty of storage room for the battery and tools and accessories and whatever in there, even with the brace in place. But this gap, it's going to look crappy. If I just make the whole thing hinge up, there's going to be a 1/4 inch or more gap here. So I have a solution for that. And also the piece, the replacement piece, if it tucks in here, and you're going to have to grind it back because it rubs on the fender because there's an indent where it fits there. So what I'm going to do, here's the piece that the replacement new sheet metal. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to cut it about here, and I'm going to come straight up. I'm going to make a nice sharp cut, straight cut, and then this piece is going to be spot welded down and seam sealed and take care of that gap along this edge. And so the actual trunk will be from here in on both sides. So it'll be a rectangle rather than this wing shaped thing. And then on this edge I'm going to cut this back about 2 inches, make a straight cut across here. This will be spot welded down and seam sealed, so it's nice uniform looking seal, and then the actual joint for the door is going to be up here somewhere, and then the whole thing is going to get wrapped with some rubber trim around all the openings. You can see I've put a sample piece on here, and that will be glued down with trim adhesive, so it just looks finished. So on the edge where it goes down and meets the main bed floor, and on this joint up through here, I'm going to have this rubber trim that just slips over the edge there, make it a nice finished edge, and again look like, hey, if the factory did it, this is how they do it. So here we go. Oh, I've got it laid out where I want to cut it. You can see that Sharpie line. I want to cut it just inside this rib here, and then up to 2 inches. I want to leave 2 inches on the back to tack weld that down. And so I've got my lines laid out where I'm going to cut this brand new piece of sheet metal. I'm a little nervous. So I've got my cutting guide clamped down. I was going to use just some spring type clamps, but I put them on there and I noticed it could walk. So I got these screw type clamps which will not walk in the middle of my cut. So there's the guide, and now we're going to cut the brand new sheet metal. And I'm going to use the Ryobi 4.5 inch. It's loud. You need earplugs. And of course the maxim of any kind of cutting or grinding is that whatever the best grinding angle is, it throws sparks all over your arms, but I'll deal with it. Well, there it is. The trunk piece, the rectangular piece, is cut out, and it's nice and square. And I just used again that 4.5 inch Ryobi cutting wheel, and that went like butter. It took like 60 seconds per cut. So now I have to come along here and take another 1/8 inch out on all the cuts to make that gap for the seal. That's no problem. Well, I finished cutting my brand new sheet metal, and you can see I've got the gap that I want. It's about 1/4 inch, 3/16, and that's going to be good for the rubber trim to go on both sides and still have enough clearance to, you know, go up and down. It's a pretty good gap at the back. Put that down, and on the other side there. So like I said, I end up using the cutting wheel and making 2 cuts to cut that gap out. But that is a good first step. I think we're close. Well, all projects evolve and designs change as you get into the thing. And you can see I said I wasn't going to cut that brace out, and now, well, I've cut that brace out. And you can see I've got a piece just kind of clamped in place there. I left the ends of the brace in place. Try not to get the light flare there. And now I'm going to weld that strip on top of that brace, and that's where the edge of the trunk lid thing is going to sit. And the reason I cut the brace out was the hinges. I was just going to put some regular, like, you know, square door hinge things on that back flange there, just have it hinge up that way. But I opened the trunk of my Infinity Q60, and I said, man, these hinges are super cool. And so I started looking, let me here it is. I don't know if I can do it with one hand, but this hinge, it's the same thing that's in the Infinity. I actually got these at the wrecking yard from a Nissan Maxima, same part number. But what's cool is the way they articulate. And so as they open, it's going to pull the door. It actually lifts the back up and away from the front of the cab. And so as the door opens, it does this. And that's going to be really cool. And in addition to being this really cool articulating hinge, they have the hydraulic cylinder built in so that, you know, when you lift the trunk up, it stays up. I took it off of this one so I could manipulate it more easily. But that's a nice, compact, articulating hinge. And so I'm going to weld, you know, I cut the brace out. It's not needed because it was there to bear weight on the top of the bed. You know, we're not going to carry firewood in this car, and it'll bear plenty of weight. I'm going to reinforce that deck lid anyway, so it'll sit halfway over on that brace. I'll put another on that side. I'm going to weld some drops to bolt the hinge to, and you know, while I was there at the wrecking yard getting the hinges from the Maxima, I got the trunk latch. So this is cool. It's the latch assembly, and there's the striker that it connects to. It's got a spring so it holds tension. When you latch it, it holds it down. And this is electronic, and it's mechanical. You know, if you look in the trunks of cars, they got a little parachute ripcord kind of thing, so if you get locked in the trunk, you can escape. So that'll be cool. I'll make a cable for that goes up into the cab, so you can manually pull and release it if you want to, but it'll also be electronic. You know, the car is going to have push button start, power windows, power locks, and so on the fob you'll have a button to release the trunk as well. So it's got the solenoid trunk latch, got the hinges, and I got a plan. So I think this is going to work. Well, I've fabricated this bracket to put the hinge on. I showed this strap that goes across here and across the brace, and now I've put some drops to attach the actual hinge to. I'm going to trim those so they look a little bit neater, but hopefully you can see in the video the advantage of this articulating hinge is that as it hinges up, it also lifts the back, and that's going to provide some nice clearance, and that's going to be a really smooth operation. You know, the Maxima, the trunk actually was able to tilt back. I'm going to weld a stop in here and stop it, a little tab in here. But this is awesome, and I had to put a little kick in here. I had to bend these a little bit because of the way the thing was made for the Maxima, but you know, it wasn't that big a deal. So I'm going to weld this in here, and now we got this really nice articulating hinge. And of course it has a hydraulic lift thing that holds it up, holds the weight of the trunk lid up. I have it out for the mock-up here. But I'm going to go ahead and weld all this in and then make the one for the other side. But that is slick. The challenge is going to be locating the lid and the bolts here on this thing, because I'm going to have to do it blind. I'm going to have to just make really precise measurements, because I'll weld studs on that and they'll go down through here, and I'm just going to have to measure where they go. I can't hold it there because you can't see it, right? It covers everything up. I'll be able to do it. It'll work out, but this is working. All right. Well, the driver's side brace is welded in, ground down, and that came out good. Now I fabbed up the other side. We're going to weld it in now. Alright, I've got the second brace in place, got some magnets holding it here where it's going to go. We're going to go ahead and spot weld this thing in. Well, these welds are not pretty, but that's what they make grinders for. I'll grind it, see if there's any pinholes, and go ahead and go over it again. But I know I got good penetration on all of them, and it's going to be strong. Well, we've got both braces welded in. I've got the hinges bolted in here, and you can see these are just awesome. The way they articulate and lift. And like I said, I'm going to put a stop so it doesn't... I'm going to match the angle of the, you can see the back wall of the cab here angles. So I'll just match the angle of this and a stop. So when this thing lifts up, it stops there, and that'll be plenty of access. But man, look at that. That is cool. I've got them countersunk about 1/8 of an inch, so there's room for the panel to lay on there. I'm going to have a patch on the panel with studs to bolt to. So they're both in, both braces, both hinges, and man, I'm happy with that. Now the trick is to lay that trunk lid panel in there and put patches on the underside with studs sticking down that go through these holes in the exact right place. Now I do have, you can see these holes are, man, they're like nearly 3/4 of an inch, and I'm using 5/16 studs. So I'll have some adjustment room to, you know, fine tune it, but I've got to get it super close. And then once I get that, the panel in, then we'll move on to the latch assembly in the center. But hey, we're making pretty good progress. I really dig these hinges. These are cool. 2012 Nissan Maxima articulating hinges. Got the idea from my Infiniti. Woohoo. Well, hey, we've got the panel hinged. Check it out. Look at the way it lifts. Look at the way the back lifts up and away. And there it goes. Right now it hits the back of the cab, but I'm going to, like I said, put some stops on those hinges. But I got the hinges connected. You know, the measurement there was super tricky. You know, your math teacher in grade school was right. You do need to know how to add and subtract fractions. You will use that later in life. Man, look how that works. I got the little gas struts in there, just stuck on there to see how it works. Man, that is smooth, and I just dig the action on it. You know, when it's down, you can see the back is sagging. I've got to brace the front and back. You know, it's sheet metal and it's warbly, so I'm going to weld some braces in there. This way, you got these ribs and it's nice and strong, but side to side, it's warbly. And so next, figure out the latch and the solenoid thing, but dang, I'm happy with that. That's working good. Alright, so I've installed the solenoid latch down inside the well area here, and then the striker assembly up on the actual panel. And you know what? that was a tough measuring exercise, because again, it's blind. You can't you can't measure from underneath, so you have to, you know, measure and then figure out where it goes and then put it on, and guess what, we landed it. It totally latches. That won't slam like that because it's going to have a rubber thing around it, and you know, you can see this is up here, but we're going to put bracing all on this lid area. But I just wanted to get that latch working, and hey man, it's latched, and I put in a wire, just a little piece of baling wire there, and I can unlatch it, because if not, I would have a real problem about how I would unlatch that. But hey, it works, man. It latches, and it unlatches, and that is kind of a victory. So hey, now I'm going to work on this bracing, make this thing absolutely secure, and then get the side piece put in and get it all trimmed out. Okay, so I've made some bracing for that lid. You can see it, it's 1-inch square tube, probably an overkill, but man, I wanted it strong. And you can see if I you know, before you could wiggle that and you know, it flopped, but now, you know, you can pick it up by the corner here. I'll pick it up by the corner. It does not flex at all, and I'm pretty sure we can put whatever kind of weight we want on top of that. I'm not going to be hauling bricks, you know, in the classic resto mod, but it's strong, and that's what I wanted. So the latch is in place, the solenoid, it latches, it releases, there's the striker and the catch, and the bracing. You see I had to angle it around the hinges there, but it came out good, you know. Yeah, I'm getting there. I think it's, I'm happy. There we go. Alright, so I got the parts painted in black SPI epoxy primer. Got this first side done, and I'll flip it over tomorrow, let it really set up, and then do the other side. And painted that, and the hinges, man, the hinges came out nice. Look how smooth and glossy those are. Here on the, super happy with that. And I went ahead and shot epoxy primer down in the wheel well, not the wheel well, the footwell thing. It's going to be covered, and I did the whole bed, and it took a lot of time to prep. You know, you got to have the metal absolutely clean. But while I was shooting up there, I go, I'll just shoot the whole bed. And so that whole thing's done in 2 coats of black epoxy primer, and you can see it's got lots of rust pits and 50 years worth of dents. It's all going to have to be smoothed out. I'm going to use Rage Ultra, you know, Evercoat Rage Ultra Bondo, and then Evercoat Slick Sand to try and get that thing smooth enough to put bed liner. The whole thing's going to get coated. The bed, the inside walls, the wheels, the trunk, inside the trunk well, all that stuff is going to be bed liner. But so you still got to get it pretty smooth. It'll show defects. So I got my work cut out here, but the trunk is essentially done, and it came out really good the way I wanted. Hi, Dean here, and I'm going to be shooting some U-Pole Raptor. This is good stuff. I'm really impressed with it. I've used it in a couple applications, and when I bought it from TCP Global, I bought a kit, and they included a gun, and it's a really cheap gun, and it's a piece of crap. And you know, when you pull the trigger comes off the plunger, and it's not very adjustable, and you can't take it apart to clean it, so the stuff dries inside, and that gun is terrible. So I finally did what I should have done to begin with, and I bought U-Pole's gun. It's an $80 gun, but what I like about it is you can take the thing apart. It's got way more adjustability, and I think it's going to do a better job. And one of the cool things about Raptor is you can get a different finish. You can really vary, you know, the texture of the finish based on your settings, the fluid setting on the tip, the pressure, and the distance. And in the instructions for this pretty nice gun, it's really well made, it looks like, they say vary the settings to achieve different textures. Wow, super not helpful. It would be nice to have some more detail about how to vary the settings. They do have a really cool video if you're going to reduce the Raptor and how to do that, and I did it when I did another project. But if you're going to use this for like a bed liner, zero help. Vary the settings. Right? Well, there's an infinite number of variables in the settings, so I'm going to figure it out myself. And I think there's other people who are probably interested in this, have the same question. So I'm doing this video. I'm going to do an extensive test, and maybe it'll help you. So check out what we're doing here. So here's a test I did on an old piece of the bed that I'm not going to use, using the crappy gun that came from TCP Global. And it's okay, but it's a super heavy, you know, if I zoom in here, that is a heavy texture, and I want it different. I want a little tighter texture. Alright, so we're going to figure this out. This is what I'm working on. It's a 68 El Camino. I'm going to be shooting the bed in bed liner. You can see lots of Bondo. I'm getting this thing smooth and flat, and I want the texture, when I finally get this thing ready to shoot the bed liner, I want the texture to be exactly what I want, and I want to know the settings to get there. So here's how we're going to do it. So check out this grid. How obsessive is this? So I've got 2 sheets of 2x4 inch, 1/4 inch MDF that I have primered, and then I've taped off in a grid. And so with the gun, they say, hey, you know, you can set the pressure from, like, you know, set it about 50, 60, max 80, right? And your distance, you know, you can go from 2 turns on the fluid nozzle to 8, and your distance should be between 12 and 16 inches. That's a huge range. So again, I'm going to obsess over this, and I'm going to do several different fluid tip settings, several different pressure settings, and 3 different distances. And so I've gridded this off, and we're going to do 48 permutations of tip settings, pressure, and distance. I've made a mask that I can put on this as I shoot it. So you can see I got a 5x5 grid, and then I've got some measuring sticks glued at 8 inches, 12 inches, 16 inches. So I can get my gun height, you know, distance to the panel exactly right, and then shoot over the grid and see. And this is kind of how it works. You put this on here, right? Here's the grid, right? And you shoot through the mask onto the tape, and you're going to shoot a 5x5 square, and I'm going to do it at 8 inches and then 12 inches and 16. I'm just going to index this thing around, and like I said, 48 permutations. So here is this sheet that I've created, and I said 48, it's actually 64, but it'll go fast, right? So you can see if I zoom in here, right, I'm going to go 3 turns, 30 psi, 8 inches, and then the same settings 12 inches and 16, and I'm going to go to 40 psi, and then I'm going to go to 50 psi, and then I'm going to go to 60 psi, and on and on and on. And it's a 8x8 grid, so that's 64 permutations. It should go fast because I can just, you know, shoot these out. But then I'm going to see what the effect of turns on the fluid nozzle, pressure and distance, how they affect the ultimate coverage and texture. And I'm going to pick the absolute one that I want. So this is how I'm going to do it. I've got my reference sheet, so as I'm spraying for each square, I know, hey, what settings, you know, I want to start at 3 turns, 30 psi, 8 inches. I've got these rulers glued. This is 8 inches, 12, 16. So I'll know about, you know, pretty close where to hold the gun. This MDF, I primed it so I'd have a consistent surface. You know, you shoot, you pull over sanded primer. And I just, you know, this is MDF. I didn't want the wood absorbing the Raptor and throwing off the result. And I've got this other sheet. It's sitting on yardsticks, just so it's standing up off of the surface, and as I move it, it won't mess up the ones I already shot. All right, so I'll shoot through this mask onto the tape, you know, and have a perfect square, 5x5 square, which is a good enough area to see how the thing looks. So this should be good, and I'm just going to load up the gun, get the settings, and then just walk through this panel and adjust the settings, and just index it and find out, you know, fluid nozzle, pressure, distance. What's the impact on the final texture finish, and how does it all look, and, you know, have a guide there for the texture I want on my final project. That. So that's the experiment. That's what I'm going to do. Should be fun. And of course the experienced painters are going to make a note that not only is it the fluid nozzle setting, the pressure, and the distance, but you have to have you know, a consistent gun angle. So I'm going to do my best to keep this absolutely perpendicular, and it's gun speed. And so what I'm going to do is watch this. I've shot this stuff before through a similar gun, and I know it's not a big fan, it's a circle. So what I'm going to do is use a, rather than try for a constant speed, I'm going to try for a constant thickness, because I think that's what matters the most, right? And as you change pressure, distance, nozzle, right, those are all going to change, but I'm going to go for a consistent thickness, and I'm going to do a 50% overlap on the passes. This comes out in a circle, so what I'll do is I'll start up here where only half the pattern goes on, and then you do a 50% overlap and end up, you know, down here, so that I get a consistent thickness sprayed, right? And I'll vary my gun speed to get that consistent thickness and coverage. I'm just going to do one coat on each of these, not 2 coats. That would be crazy. But that's some more details on the process. Yeah, I said I'm using the Raptor material. There's lots of videos, you know, it's pretty cool stuff. You open the container, you pour the activator in up to that line, and then you shake it and mix it up really good, and then you just screw the gun into the container and it's ready to go. And so this is their very nozzle gun, and you can see hopefully in the video they didn't have any kind of scribe mark, so I don't think there it is. So I scribed a mark so I can see how many turns I'm turning the fluid nozzle out, and they got a locking ring. So I'm going to start at 3 and then walk through a series of progressions. Okay, I'm all teed up. I got the bottle attached to the spray gun. I got my initial settings. I got a piece of paper. I'm going to just do initial first test spray, make sure it's coming out good. And I've got my PPE on. You know, this is serious stuff. So, got a respirator, got gloves, and I've got ventilation in the shop.
Got the Harbor Freight fan over there pulling air out. Got a window open so I can pull some air through. We're going to go ahead and do this thing.
Alright, so I shot a whole bunch of permutations on this thing. And of course I got my yardstick drug through there. But the point is made, and you can see I didn't finish all my planned permutations because the canister I was shooting ran out, and I'm willing to burn one to figure this out, but I'm not willing to burn two. But I figured it out, and the conclusions are it's not going to shoot. I was trying a set at 30 psi. It doesn't shoot at 30. So the minimum it will shoot at is 40. And so all the 30 tests are meaningless because I had to turn it up a little bit to get the fluid to flow. And the distance isn't that big a deal, but 12 inches is the ideal to get a really nice consistent pattern. And so the only thing that really matters is the fluid tip setting. And it does have a big difference on the you know, the fineness or coarseness of the texture. So it's all about the fluid setting, and you know, you just spray at 50 psi, 50-55 at a 12-inch distance, and then you vary that fluid tip to get a different texture. I went from a setting of 3 up to 6 before I ran out, and you can go, you know, 7 or 8 and get coarser. But I'll show a high-res picture. But there's the 6, and it's a little coarser than I want. The 3 is a little too fine. What I think I'm going to do is lay down my first coat at 4. You can't see it. I'm going to lay down the first coat at 4 and then finish it with 3 at 50 psi at 12 inches. And that's going to give me the finish I want. But it was worth doing. I learned a lot. Well, here's where I'm at with the whole bed and trunk thing. It took me a long time to get that bed flat, and that is the final round of just spotting some Bondo in on top of epoxy primer. That's about round 4. I got the fenders straightened out. I think it's gonna, you know, if I were doing glossy black paint, it probably wouldn't look great, but with the bed liner, I think it's going to be just fine. You can see there was a opening into the cab for the smuggler's box, which the El Camino had. You can see I've welded a piece of sheet metal over that. I'm blocking it off because it would have hit these brackets anyway. It wouldn't have fit, and I just want the room in the trunk. So I'm getting ready to seam seal that. One more coat of just a sealer coat of primer, epoxy primer, and then I'm going to texture in the well first, and then I'm going to weld this piece down, which is the front piece of the bed. You know, it's been cut out for the trunk. There's the trunk, and this is the tailgate cover. It's gonna put bed liner on that. These are the panels, access panels on the bed, and there's the bed tailpiece. It's all epoxied, ready to go. So like I said, sealer coat in the well down there, get the bed liner in it, then weld the bed in, and then do the whole bed in bed liner, and I think it is ready. I'll put a sealer coat on top of this Bondo here. That thing was beat. You know, it's a 50-year-old car, and some people use their El Caminos as trucks and throw stuff in there, and it was beat. But I think I got it where it's going to look really good in bed liner. Alright, so I just shot the well area with the Raptor, and man, I think I dialed in the texture. See if I can get in close here without touching it because it's still wet. But man, I think that is just what I was looking for. I took the light away. I think you can see it. Beautiful. And that's going to look good. Yeah, it's covered up most of the time, but I wanted it to look nice when you open the trunk. And so, next, I pull this paper off, pull the masking off. I weld down the floor section there, and then shoot the door and the whole bed and sides and all that stuff. I've got to spot weld in the trim studs in that rear window channel. I got to weld that in before I wrapped her up here on the back. Don't want the heat to mess it up. But I've got the measurements. I got a glass guy coming over to confirm, and I think we're making progress. But I am super happy with the texture settings that I came up with here. Looks super good. Very nice. Well, I'm getting super close here. I've put the seam sealer in, you know, between the bed floor and the sidewall there. There's a big gap there. It's got to be sealed. You can see it. Put it in 24 hours ago. It's going to take a good couple days to cure. I've got the tail piece welded in and seam sealed, and of course I had welded down that front piece, and I did one more test fit on the door here, you know, before we put the final sealer coat of epoxy down and then spray the bed liner. I just wanted to do a test fit because I hadn't had it in with this side back piece welded in, and you know, I had to do a little filler work to get that right. So you know, it's looking good. The gap in the back is okay. I wish it was a little tighter, but it is what it is. I think it's going to be okay. This lip up front, it nearly sits flush, but it didn't sit flush even from the factory with that thing screwed and welded down. So that's kind of how the sheet metal is formed and just kind of what it is. So I think overall it's a good look. It's going to look nice, and that thing does fit. I did a little bit of alignment work, just, you know, test fitting before you know, you're committed when you shoot this thing. So I'm going to shoot it, and just going to let this seam sealer cure a few more days. Well, I got the Raptor sprayed on the bed, and man, I think that came out nice. I'm super pleased with how it laid down with the texture. I'll zoom in a little bit there. It's just what I wanted. The body work that I did, getting those level and straight, man, that took a lot of time, and I think it paid off. It came out. The fender wells are nice. The you know, the front wall, the well, everything here, man, it came out good. The Raptor laid down really nice over the seam sealer. You can see a little line there, but I think that's normal, and it looks, yeah, it looks all right. Looks okay. So I am happy. Now I just have to put that lid in for the final time, adjust it, hook up the release cable, the solenoid, mount the battery, and this will be done. There's the lid. I shot that, of course, in the bed liner as well, and I went ahead and shot the underside of it, the frame and everything. You can't really see it there, but that'll just make it look consistent and good. I also shot the cover that goes on the tailgate and these side access plates go in the side of the bed here. See these openings on each side, so you can access the tail lights and stuff. So we're about ready to wrap this thing up, and man, I am pleased. I just keep coming down here to the shop and looking at it as it dries. It's dry to the touch now, but it has to cure a good day or two before I start reassembling stuff. But man, woohoo! I had said previously I was going to weld some stops into the hinges, because with the factory Nissan hinges, their hood or trunk went went further back, and you can see I've got this worked out now where it stops pretty much parallel with the back of the cab, the front of the bed, and I'll show you the tabs I put in to do that. So here's a close-up of the tabs. Now you can see a rubber stop that Nissan had, so when they hit the stop it didn't clang, but I just welded a tab. I just fabricated, cut a little piece of metal and welded it onto the hinge, so hopefully you can see it there. I'll try to highlight it in the video, but that is working good, and it stops it from hitting the front of the bed, back of the cab, and looks cool, I think. Well, there it is. My El Camino has a trunk. I'm done. You know, I said I got the bed liner shot. I had to get the bed smooth, and I got the bed liner shot, and it came out awesome. You know, the fender wells look great. I'm happy. Everything's good. And now the inside of the trunk is shot in bed liner. You can see I've got the battery mounted. That came out awesome, and you can see there's a cable there, which is a manual release for the trunk latch. It's basically like a choke cable for a lawnmower, but you know, hey, if the battery dies, man, you got to be able to get this thing open. I will have some remote jumping charging posts up under the hood, but that's just an additional safeguard. But you know, the hinges came out great. I got the gas struts on there. It articulates exactly the way I wanted. Really cool. And of course it latches, and you can see I was gonna trim it with you know, a rubber product, but I decided I tried that, I didn't like the look, and so I decided to trim it with it's aluminum, 3/4 by 1/2 inch angle, and you can see it looks a little darker because I just shot it. It'll blend in here pretty quick. But I tried it without that, and it was just a really hard, just a cut sheet metal edge hanging out in space. Didn't look good. So that to me looks like, hey, it's intentional. There's a hatch there, you know, a trunk. And yeah, I think that came out good. I wish it sat down a little more flush, but again, it looks absolutely intentional. So yeah, it's done. How about that? My El Camino has a trunk, and to release it, I just got a knob here. Just pull it, and voila, trunk comes up with the super cool hinges. There is a solenoid built into there, and there you can see there's a wire connector. It will have a wire on it, and I'm going to have the you know, the push button start, power windows, power door locks, and there'll be a button on the key fob to pop the trunk electronically. But we got a manual cable just in case. It was particularly important while I was working on this, because if you latched it, I don't know how you get it open. You had to break stuff. But there it is, the 68 El Camino. The bed is done, and it has a custom trunk, and there's a lot of room in there, you know, for the battery, which I wanted to relocate. I think that cleans the motor compartment up, and then you can throw jumper cables, whatever, tools, all that stuff. So this part of the project is, I'll slam the trunk lid for emphasis, make sure that's pulled back. It is done. Thanks for watching. Hope you found it interesting.